thank you for being here this afternoon. So I'm going to talk about SBVR to mapping in the domain of legal rules. My name is Firas and Khalil. So this is the outline of my presentation. First of all, I will introduce GRCTC, the center where I work, me and my colleague Marcello. I will talk about the methodology that we have developed at the center. I'll talk about SBVR. I'll suppose that you know OWL, that being RuleML. So then I'll talk about mapping SBVR to vanilla OWL, what has been described in the literature. Then I'll talk about mapping SBVR to FIRO, which is the ontology that we have developed for the legal domain. And I'll finish with the conclusions and future directions. So the GRCTC is the Governance, Risk and Compliance Technology Center. It has been established in 2012. It's funded by Enterprise Ireland and IBA Ireland, so it's basically backed by the Irish government. It's hosted in UCC, University College Cork, and it's in an academic partnership with the University College Dublin and NUI Galway. So in GRCTC, we conduct R&D on the use of semantic technologies for GRC in the financial industry, of course. We have a multidisciplinary team. We have computer scientists, knowledge engineers, and legal experts, which is very crucial to model this domain. So the issue that we are trying to resolve, we can define it simply, we have a very complex legal text, and the regulation is really very complex. It's not a secret, and spoiler alert, it's getting even more and more complex. The complexity and ambiguity of the legalese, which is the legal English that is employed in legal rules, is also very complex, and there is no any assuring signs that they will refrain from doing all this crazy stuff. So, and we also noticed that the information systems of the financial industry were a key contributor to the crisis that was in 2008 and affected almost all of the world. So why is this happening? This is happening basically because there is a huge gap between the regulation and legal knowledge and the formal knowledge modeling. So to bridge that gap, we have created a methodology, and this is a very basic view of that methodology. It's far more complex than this, but basically we have subject matter experts who are lawyers. So they do some kind of voodoo, I don't know, sacrifice babies or something, and they will extract legal knowledge. And when they extract this legal knowledge, they will communicate it to a semantic technology expert who himself will translate these rules. So in GRCTC, we have adopted SBVR, which is an industry standard, as the common language between the between the subject matter expert and the semantic technology expert. And the semantic technology expert will be writing in OWL all of this knowledge that has been described in SBVR. So this talk, we will be talking about how to translate the knowledge that has been modeled by the subject matter expert into OWL. So SBVR. So it's a standard that has been developed by the Object Management Group. It stands for the Semantics of Business Vocabulary and Business Rules. It's made for business people to describe their activities, and conceptually it defines two things, the vocabulary and the rulebook. And everything in SBVR is written in a controlled natural language called SBVR SE. Basically, the SBVR people don't think that SBVR SE is a controlled natural language, but everybody else disagrees and classifies it as a controlled natural language. So basically, there is noun concepts in the vocabulary. You have general noun concepts like price, prevailing market condition, and share. So these correspond to classes usually. You have individual noun concepts like Bank of Ireland, Cork. These are individual instances of some concepts. There are other things, but I'm not going to cover them in this talk. We also have verb concepts, and the verb concept is made of one verb symbol and one or more verb concept roles. So, for example, if here we have bank transfers asset, this whole thing is a verb concept. It has transfer as a verb, and it also has bank and asset. Both of them are general noun concepts, but they also play roles in that verb concept. So they are verb concept roles. Yes, and verb concept roles can be either general or individual noun concepts. The rulebook defines two major kinds of rules. We have behavioral or operative rules, and these have the form of it is obligatory that, prohibited, or permitted. They are characterized by their deontic modality, and in legal speak, they correspond to regulative norms. They also define definitional or structural rules, and they are characterized by their alethic modality, and in legal speak also they will correspond to constitutive norms. So in this talk, we will only concentrate on behavioral or operative rules. So a rule can be of that form. So let's say we have this rule. It is prohibited that a gun dealer sells a gun to a person who has a criminal record. So we have the modality that starts always at the beginning. Then we have a verb concept that says gun dealer sells gun to person. And we have here another verb concept that says person has a criminal record. So now I'm going to talk about how the literature describes the translation between SBVR and OWL. So basically, all the mappings that has been described, they are based on the very basic idea of mapping general noun concept to classes, individual noun concept to individuals belong to classes, and verbs to object or data properties. They are all basically the same. They all get this inspiration from the big, thick SBVR manual. So if you have, for example, person has criminal record, we create two classes, and we have this object property which says has criminal record. So as for the rules, there is multiple descriptions of multiple mappings. You can either map it to vanilla OWL, or you can map it to other rule languages. But from our perspective, this rule has way too much information that a lawyer can understand that is not present or cannot be captured by what is existing. So if you take a look here, you can see that if a person has a criminal record, he doesn't break that rule. What is important in this sentence is gun dealer sells a gun to a person. So selling the gun is the important part. So we need to understand what are the qualifying conditions and what are the conditions that say that, okay, if you have this information, then you are breaking the rule. So in order to map SB, so we created FIRO in order to model all this legal information. So I'm going to talk about mapping to FIRO. FIRO is the Financial Industry Regulatory Ontology. It's a stack of ontologies. So at the very basic level, we have FIRO H, which is FIRO high level, and it defines the anatomy of legal rules. We have FIRO D that builds on top of FIRO H, and it describes rules of a domain, for example, anti-money laundering. Then we have FIRO OP, which is operation specific, and it maps concrete events or concrete data into FIRO D and FIRO H. And then we have FIRO structure, which describes the structure of legal documents. So the basic building block of FIRO H is an action, and an action is an abstract category of events. So an action is a class that has factor, a factor, and has verb, a verb. So in FIRO domain, if I have person has criminal record, the first thing I need to do is to create two classes, person and criminal record, that are subclasses of factor. The second step, I create a verb has that is an individual of the class verb. And then I will create the action that corresponds to this verb concept. And this action is called person has criminal record. It's a subclass of action, has factor person, has factor criminal record, and has verb. This is in FIRO D. This is the domain modeling. And now in the operation specific, so now I want to describe my data. I have Edward Hyde has arrest. So I create individual Edward Hyde, individual of person. The arrest number, it's an individual of the class criminal record, and the verb has, and here I make it an individual of the class has criminal record. A person has a criminal record. As for the rule, this is how we see the rules. So a rule is basically made of one modality and a at least one condition. A condition is simply an action that figures in a rule. So every regulative rule has exactly one main condition. We call it the deontic condition, and it has an arbitrary number of additional conditions which are called applicability conditions. So in case of an obligation rule, we have an obligation and a compliance, which is a deontic condition and any additional conditions, or a prohibition and a breach and extra conditions. So these extra conditions, we call them applicability conditions. They determine if an event is relevant to a rule, and the deontic condition determine if a relevant event complies or breaches a rule. So here, if I have this example, we have one prohibition, we have one breach condition and one applicability condition. So it is prohibited that the gun dealers, they're basically the same example. So we create a rule, we call it rule 1. We assign it a modality, which is a prohibition. Then here we create two classes. Gun dealer sells gun to person. This is the first action that we have. And person has criminal record. This is the second action that we have. So now what we need to do is to create the compliance condition. So this is a breach of the class breach. We declare two equivalent classes. In the first one, we say that it complies to rule 1. And in the second one, we say that gun dealers, well, the first action has a factor some person of the second action. And this is how we connect the verb concepts in OWL. Sorry, I ran too fast. For conclusions and future directions, we talked about the methodology, we talked about subject matter expert. These are not very different from what has been presented before. We need some experts to extract the legal knowledge. We have the semantic technology experts who talk using SBVR. And then the semantic technology expert has to map them. We showed that the mapping to vanilla OWL is not sufficient in our view. We need that extra legal information. And I introduced FIRO, which describes actions and conditions that corresponds to verb concept and verb concept rules in SBVR. And then I talked about the mapping, the vocabulary, and the rule book. So as for future direction, this is what we are aiming for. So we need to do some legal querying on these ontologies that will be developed on specific domains. So, for example, we want to know what are the rules that prohibit a certain action. We want to know in what context a person is considered a gun dealer, for example. This is more related to the other kind of rules, not the regulative rule, but the constitutive rules that define a specific legal reality. And we want also to do stuff like determining if a business rule is compliant with a legal rule or not, a business action in Firas speak. And we also want to perform classification on events to see if we have some events that comply with some rules or breach other rules. Thank you.
It's basically a representation using OWL syntax because you lose the modal semantics in the transformation. Okay.
Yes, but just between parentheses, these models are not real modalities in SBVR. They are just a syntactic sugar for normal implications.
Okay, yeah. So in the chain, from the legal language to OWL, the modality has been lost. So we do something similar in legal RuleML. We found RDFS was sufficient.
Okay.
So we have basically you construct an object which represents your rule, and it's got these various components.
Okay.
So you're representing the syntax of the rule, not really the semantics. So the comparative thing we do there is with arguments.
Okay.
I have a few questions.
stack of ontologies. Because basically we need some framework to describe the rules, so we need to separate it. We know that FireH, we can give it to our industry partners. They can use it to model the legal domains that they are interested in, or we can give we can separate the domains, because every domains can share vocabulary, and also they can have a separate vocabulary. So we need to have this separation even in viewing the rules. We need to know that this thing is the core foundation of the rules, and the others are described domains. And on the third part, we need to know the mappings, because even in a single domain, you can have multiple lawyers modeling multiple versions of the domain. They have different interpretations because of this complex legalese. And we also can have different mappings. So how you define your FireOD, the domain, affects how you do the mappings. And also you can have multiple interpretations of the mappings of the data that you have to the domain that you have described. I hope that answered it. Yeah.
We have more questions.
So go back to your...
Probably we can reconvene for the questions. The pizzas has arrived, and I think they will get cold if they are
Yes,
not eaten.
pizza, no questions for me.
There are two questions, and we can take them.
No, I can
maybe
Yeah,
Benjamin then.
Okay, yeah, just look at the So, are you interested in trying to map SBVR with the deontics at the more semantic level into rules also? Or is that something that is sort of further away, or you're not sure yet? I'm just kind of curious, because I agree with Tara's observation that this is more at the syntactic level.
Yes, it is at the syntactic level. We are more interested in mining the rules themselves than executing the rules. Well, it depends on a lot of factors. We are a technology center, so we are between academia and industry. It depends on a lot of factors. So, but at some point, yes, we will